Wow. As a musician, I wouldn't have made it onto this stage, although I had piano lessons when I was a kid. I had a great teacher. She was from Spain. She had a charming accent when speaking German. And I remember one particular thing about her. Her birthday was on the 27th of January. And to her, as a musician, this was a very special date. On the 27th of January, also Mozart was born. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was born on the 27th of January, 1756. He was born right here in Salzburg, just a few hundred meters away. And he was born into a very musical family. His father was a renowned violinist, composer, and music teacher. And he, Leopold Mozart, also started to teach his kids, Wolfgang Amadeus and his elder sister, Maria Anna, called Nannerl. Give me the clicker. And Mozart started to learn to play the piano and the violin. And young Mozart also started to practice, to learn how to compose music. And I imagine young Mozart sitting at his desk in Getreidegasse here in Salzburg. It's already dark outside. He's sitting and practicing how to compose. And at some point, his eyes start to hurt because he only has the dim light of a candle. And I would like to be able to tell him, hey Mozart, 2.5 centuries later, there will be electricity and electric light in every household. And you could sit there and practice composing all night. But probably he couldn't have anyways because his father was very strict and would have sent him to bed. So it turned out that Mozart had incredible talent. He was very, very good at playing the piano, playing the violin, listening to songs and replaying them from memory. He also continued his practice in composing. And very soon, at the age of 6 years, his father Leopold took the two children on the first concert journey. The journey took them to Munich. Back at the time, they had to go with a horse carriage. It took about 2 or 3 days to travel from Salzburg to Munich. And the ride wasn't comfortable at all. It was very cumbersome. It was a tough, bumpy ride. And the horse carriage had hard wooden benches. And the children, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and his sister, would start to sit on their hands to soften the ride a bit. But their father immediately told them, hey kids, you must not sit on your hands. You need the hands for playing the piano and the violin. So they didn't have a comfortable ride. And I would like to shout to young Mozart, hey Mozart, 2.5 centuries later, you could have that ride in a comfortable BMW, and that BMW would be produced with the help of Zenon. But Mozart didn't have a BMW. Anyways, his concerts, the first concert in Munich was a huge success. And they returned to Salzburg, and soon after, his father planned the next concert journey. And Mozart had already gained a bit of fame, so his father was able to organize a concert in Vienna in front of the Empress Maria Theresa, which is a very special thing. She was the most powerful woman at the time. So they went to Vienna, and Mozart gave his concert. And there's this funny story. that young Mozart, after the concert, climbed onto the lap of the Empress and hugged her and gave her a kiss. And this definitely wasn't according to protocol. But as said, Mozart was already famous. He was a Wunderkind, a child prodigy. By the way, did you know that the word Wunderkind made it into English language in the 19th century then? And I don't know if it was due to Mozart, but I invite you to think about Mozart every time you hear the word Wunderkind. So Mozart would travel a lot throughout his entire life. Mozart would be away from home over 3,700 days. And as you know, unfortunately, Mozart died very young. He died at the age of 35. So these 3,700 days accounted for roughly a third of his life away from home. And his father was also criticized for traveling so much with the children because it put a lot of strain on them, and the kids would get sick every now and then. And once Mozart had a very, very severe typhus fever. He nearly died of that fever. And today, you can treat such a fever very well with antibiotics. And those antibiotics today you get in every pharmacy in every corner of the country. And why is that? Because there's pharmaceutical companies who produce high-quality drugs at scale. This is why you can buy antibiotics in every corner of the country. And the best of these pharmaceutical companies, of course, work with Zenon. But those companies weren't around back then. It was difficult to treat those diseases. They weren't around back then. Wait a minute. There's one story I'd like to tell you. On the next big journey of Mozart, when he took a tour across Europe, he started off in Germany, and he made a stop in a town called Schwetzingen. And this town is close to another city called Darmstadt. And Darmstadt today is the home of the famous company Merck, who also have a big branch in the pharmaceutical sector. And at the time of Mozart, the Merck family had taken over a pharmacy in Darmstadt, the Engel Apotheke, which basically would become the Merck we know today later. So one of the companies who work with Zenon today, Merck is having Zenon in their laboratories in Darmstadt, and I've visited the facilities. It's a fantastic application. So one of those companies was already around back at Mozart's time. Isn't that fascinating? And I don't know if Mozart, when he was in Schwetzingen, was supplied any medicine coming out of that pharmacy, but maybe he was. Would be a great customer reference, right? This is how old pharmacies looked like back in the 18th century. And if you're not from that area in Germany, and if you do not know the town called Schwetzingen, I cannot blame you. But you probably have seen this city before. Looks different today. It's Frankfurt. Traveling further, Mozart also visited Frankfurt. And he gave 3 concerts in Frankfurt. And in one of the concerts, he had a listener who would become very famous himself later in his life. It was a 14-year-old Goethe. So I already mentioned that Mozart would travel through Europe. And I would like to shout out to Mozart, if you would be in Frankfurt today, you would find an international airport, and you could go anywhere in the world. Maybe go to Saudi Arabia, to Riyadh, and do a concert tour in the Middle East. And if you would check in your luggage at Frankfurt Airport, it would be handled by an advanced automated baggage handling system, monitored and controlled by a software called Zenon. But Mozart didn't find an international airport there, so he carried on his journey with a horse carriage. And he also went to Belgium, to Brussels. And I don't think that Mozart drank beer in Brussels. He was only 11 years old. But maybe his father Leopold did after an exhausting day of organizing the concerts for his kids, being the tour manager. Maybe he had a pint coming from a renowned brewery called Artois Brewery. And I'm sure you know this brewery. Today with the brand name Stella Artois. Today this brewery is part of the beverage company AB InBev, and they use zenon in their global operations to optimize their operations on a worldwide scale. So another zenon user who was around back in the time of Mozart. If your company was around also back in the times of Mozart, please tell me in the coffee break. I'd be very curious to learn about it. That's an old brewery here. Also looks different today. So I was asked, was Mozart also a rebel? And at the time, Mozart wasn't seen too much of a rebel. But I think in today's eyes, he was. He dedicated his entire life, his entire energy towards creating the thing he loved and cared about, music. In his short life, he left us over 600 pieces. And back in the time, it was common for musicians to seek permanent employment, to have a regular salary coming in. But Mozart eventually had this fixed employment. But he wasn't happy with it. It didn't give him enough freedom to pursue his art, to be creative, to compose, to do the things he wanted to do. So he resigned, and the story tells he was finally dismissed by his employer with a kick in the, because he wasn't too happy about Mozart leaving. Speaking of rebels, I would like to introduce my dear colleague and friend, Stefan, onto the stage. Hey, Stefan. Rocket.
Hi, Phillip. It seems that every day I learn something new about you. I didn't know that you took piano lessons when you were a kid. But I need to admit that I'm glad that he didn't make it as a professional musician, because otherwise I would be alone here on stage now. And the second thing I didn't know is that you were inspired by Mozart.
Yes, in fact I was. But what about you? What about your childhood heroes?
Thank you. Wonderful question, Phillip. I didn't take any piano lessons when I was a kid. But my boy does now, and I hope that counts too. The heroes of my childhood, the rebels of my childhood, and probably also yours, there were three of them. First, there was Michael Knight, and with his famous car KIT. Advanced AI in action. But I didn't know that back in the days. It took me actually very long to find out who the true and real hero in Knight Rider was. Because it wasn't Michael, and it wasn't KIT. No, very often it was Barney, the quiet technician working behind the scenes, ensuring that everything works together properly. The second MacGyver. The master of improvisation. With his Swiss Army knife, he could solve any issue. And last, Luke Skywalker. From farm boy to hero, brave, resilient, fighting against impossible odds. And these three, they taught me something. You obviously don't need to have a cool haircut to be a hero. But joke aside, I really learned a lesson from them. If you want to be a hero, if you want to be a rebel, you need to be brave, you need to be resilient, but also the power of human and technology working together. Michael and Kit, Barney with their equipment, MacGyver with his Swiss Army knife, and Luke with his lightsaber, for sure. And I see these principles at play also today. The principle of human and technology working together when it comes to software-defined automation. Our industry has long been dominated by the Galactic Empire. Massive automation vendors controlling everything. Proprietary systems, rigid hardware, slow, cautious innovation. I'm not sure if you remember, but in 2012, Industry 4.0 hit the stage. And I was visiting trade fairs, and it seemed that every device on display did become an Industry 4.0 device overnight. But in reality, nothing really changed. The empire slowed down everything, big promises, slow delivery. Let's take a look how automation architectures evolved in the last 30 years. I brought with me a bottling line with its various machines. And let's see how the automation architecture of such a bottling line looked like. So classical, there is a PLC for every machine. And there is an HMI for every machine, a SCADA for every machine, and some cabling in between. This is how automation looked in 1995. Fast forward 30 years from now, how does automation architectures look like today? Have you spotted the difference? Right, where there was Profibus before is now Profinet. Then COVID-19 hit. Lead times skyrocketed. Hardware wasn't available anymore. Semiconductors vanished. Part of the problem, vendor-specific OT hardware uses very often proprietary chips, making every solution unique. And this special context revealed the dependency of companies to their vendors. The Galactic Empire did not only control their offering, they controlled the entire supply chain itself. Some of you in this room faced these challenges already firsthand, and you saw the limitations of legacy systems. You are among those who began to look for new approaches. And this is exactly why the rebellion, the shift to software-defined automation matters. Think of software-defined automation like the force, invisible, connecting everything, and very powerful when applied correctly. Software-defined automation will help us to adapt factories overnight and to integrate new technologies easily and to scale up production globally. And what does that mean for our bottling line here? Software-defined automation is about moving the brain from hardware into software. It's about decoupling logic from machines. And what does it take to transform such a bottling line into, basically into the future of bottling lines? Well, we need the force, clear. What else do we need? Ideally, a plant cloud to host our industrial automation software. And we take the first step and we eliminate the IPCs on the factory floor and replace it with thin clients. We virtualize level 2 and level 3 applications. But we're taking this one step further. We're not just removing IPCs from plant floor. No, we are eliminating PLCs from plant floor as well. And we replace it with a software-defined and cloud-native OT architecture. What do you think does it take to take these steps? What are the prerequisites? We need gigabyte networks, we need virtual industrial software, and we need virtual PLCs. And I'm not a technician, but I was told these three things are around already. If you now believe this is just a thesis, no, it's not. It's backed up with data. McKinsey recently asked, is automation heading for a tipping point? And their research clearly indicates disruption is accelerating. Software-defined automation is gaining adoption. And is now the choice to adapt or falling behind. The rebels have all the tools to succeed. Virtual PLCs, running applications in Docker container, standardization, modular production, you name it. They're all there. So the question isn't whether change is coming, it's whether you will take part in shaping it. When COVID hit and supply chain collapsed, the systems of the empire did become a liability. Skilled OT personnel were scarce, updates slow, and compliance with regulations and cybersecurity a challenge. Software-defined automation is not only about speed, cost, and compliance. No, it tackles a fundamental human problem: the lack of skilled automation engineers. By adopting IT-style patterns and bringing them to the factory floor, we will not only make automation easier, faster, and more maintainable. No, we will make it available for more people in more places. The question is, will you side with the empire or will you join the rebel alliance? The choice is yours. A decision has to be made, but we all know how this is going to end. So here are my key takeaways. The force of software-defined automation exists. The tools exist. The strategy exists. And the tipping point is approaching. McKinsey says in the next 5 to 10 years, you're either beyond it or out of it. Software-defined automation is part of a bigger journey. Smart factories, real Industry 4.0, resilient supply chains, and sustainable operations. And it's a journey we can take together as members of the Rebel Alliance. Some of you are wielding these powers already today. Others have to join, the chance now to join. So I invite you, take the step, and may the force be with you. Thank you.